Legal compliance made easy. That's what we're going to be talking about. So, obviously, as you may already know, this is not a law class. We're going to talk about certain considerations that you may have. We've got people from different states. Some people said, a person said New Mexico, another person from Texas. So, we won't specialize in any specific state laws. But what I will share with you, as you see on the screen, there is a book that will be shared with you that'll be emailed to you because it'll be attached. It's a PDF file. It may go to your spam folder. So if you're asking, where is it? But let me show you something that's interesting about it. Here it is. And if you go to this, do you see where it's a very detailed table of contents? So let's say I'm on chapter 6, trademarks, branding, and identity, trademark rights. If I click on this page 76, this table of contents, it brings me right to it, page 76, and there it is. So I wanted to let you know that when you download it, it will be PDF sent to you, that the table of contents is clickable. So be aware of that, that it is a useful tool. It's 222 pages because the topic that we're talking about could not possibly be done in 90 minutes, but we're going to give you things to think about so that as you go through this free book, everything we're providing, your presence here today, we certainly welcome you. And also, we welcome you to the free webinar. We welcome you to the free book. We also welcome you to the podcast as well, which is also free. So thank you for joining us, because without you, we wouldn't be here. SCORE was created in the year 1964, 60 years ago, or well, in October, it'll be 61 years ago. And we're here to support you. We're here to make dreams come true. The reason why I volunteer is because I'm passing it forward. People help me along the way in my 31-year journey, which continues. I'm the chancellor and president of Enterprise College, and I'm just passing it forward, and I'm happy to do that. It's the right thing to do. So today we're going to talk about how legal compliance can be made easy. And the way it's made easy is that you understand it. For those who are just arriving, we have a couple of people who have just arrived. My name is Dr. David Ewan. I'm the chair of SCORE Western Massachusetts, but we certainly support the country. For those that are just arriving, I will put some items into the chat. It's a repeat for some, but new for those that have just arrived. If you're looking for a free mentor, someone to help you with tips, tricks, and techniques, you can go to that link to see local mentors that are available. And also you can look at our previous webinars on our Spotify site. And if you have any other questions, I left my email there with you. Let's continue. So as a reminder, this is not a law class. You'll learn what business owners need to consider. So this is a class of considerations so that you don't miss anything. And that's probably more important than anything else. The nitty gritty and detail is in this book that we'll be emailing you for free, 100% free, no sign in, no strings attached. It's just an attached PDF file. You'll even see the watermark. It's in public domain. So share it with whoever you want. It's free and open to anyone, really. So that's just a gift we give. So if again, I put in the chat some contact information. If you need a mentor, there's the website in the chat. And also my email address. If you have any other questions, that's also in the chat. I'm the chair of SCORE Western Massachusetts. I thank you for coming. So let's talk about the various types of business. Now, very often, the first kind of business is where you don't do any type of registration. You are legally able to have a business, and the official business name is your first name and last name. It's just your name. That's called a sole proprietorship. Sole meaning only one. So you're the only owner, and you make all the decisions. And an example is a little girl doing a lemonade stand at the street corner. That's a sole proprietorship. Um, Anyone doing, for example, the gig economy, for example, if they're an Uber driver or something like that, or food delivery driver, that is a sole proprietorship. You might be delivering food for DoorDash. That's an example. Or you might be making some crafts on Etsy and you sell it. Or you might be a software developer and you freelance on Upwork, for example. That's a sole proprietor. It's easy and cheap to start, and you can start if you haven't started a business, you can start that way, no problem at all. The taxation at the federal level is a 1040 Schedule C, where you have your deductions. At the state level, it varies. We have state taxes here in Massachusetts. In the state of Florida, they do not. And so you would have to check with your own state regarding that. As I said in the introduction, one person said they were from Texas, another person from New Mexico. So we have people across the country here at this webinar. But anyways, the taxes are with your personal return. And you would just make the consideration that you're also running a business as a sole proprietor. Another business type is LLC, which is more common now than it was decades ago, limited liability corporation. That protects your personal things. What do I mean by that? You know, when I have an LLC and someone sues me uh, because of something, they sue the corporation. So they might be able to win assets, for example, from the company, but not my personal bank account. So basically, a lawsuit is in terms of the corporation, not the person. So it makes it less personal that way. There are forms to send to the state. For example, you would send what is commonly called an articles of organization, which is the birth certificate of the corporation. That is done first, followed by the social security number for the corporation, which is called an EIN number, which is filed with an SS4 form from irs.gov, which we'll talk about that. Then there's other forms you may need to send to the state as well for licensing and other things as well. But anyways, the LLC, that's the most common type of corporation nowadays, where you can either run it alone, similar to what you were doing before as a sole proprietorship, or you can run it with others. Usually when you file that articles of organization, you need a president, treasury, and secretary. That can be just you. Think of the plumber or the electrician that's picking up supplies at Home Depot at 6 o'clock in the morning. Those are LLCs, and they're corporations as well, and they can still be a one-person business. And you can pay taxes with your personal return or separately as well. Let's go to a full corporation, which is much larger than what you would consider a small corporation, but it's a business. It is a separate, like a legal person. The owners are called shareholders. Normally, you don't see that with LLC, but with a corporation. And when I say corporation, I always use the example of Microsoft and Google, but the owners are called shareholders. They have the stake in the business. There's more rules and paperwork, and you can sell shares for money. So that's what a the full corporation is like. You have to pay tax twice because you have to pay tax for the company, and then you also have to pay your personal tax as well because you're an employee of the company. Let's talk about registrations and licenses. And it's different from state to state. So this is an example of what I said. It's not a law class. These are things to consider. So here's the first thing you need to consider. What kind of registration do you need? What kind of licenses do you need? Do you need to register with the state? Well, for a corporation, you probably would. You need the articles of organization. Do you need to file a DBA with your local government, for example, City Hall? DBA is doing business as. Some corporations need to register in the city so the city knows what companies are operating there. It's not true for all cities and states across the country. So you have to check for the rules, but get the correct licenses. For example, if you're opening up a food truck, what type of licenses do you need to serve food? If you're doing personal care assistant type of business, is there any type of license for healthcare or well-being that you need to do in your state? These are the things you need to do. If you miss doing the license, if you are required to, depending on your city and state, there could be fines or you could be forced to close. So that is a worthy thing to be looking at right from the beginning. Let's talk about some tax basics, which I already spoke about before, but it's worthy talking about it again. So as I said before, this is not a law class. You'll learn what business owners need to consider. This is just a class of considerations. So let's talk about some tax basics. Before getting the EIN, which I call the Social Security number of the business, EIN stands for Employer Identification Number. There is the Articles of Organization that goes to the state. The Articles of Organization, once approved and stamped by the Secretary of State in your local state, then that is the birth certificate of the corporation. Once you have that official name, then you go to step 2, which is the EIN. Remember, EIN is not step 1. I've seen a lot of people go to do that because it's very simple to go to irs.gov/SS4, and they make the mistake of getting the EIN number again, because they tried to do that first before the Articles of Organization. So there's the website there, irs.gov/SS4. There are different forms, and I'm going to give you a screenshot. I'm going to show this to you, but you have to pay federal, state, and local taxes. All the rules are different. In today's webinar, many of you are from different states. I'm in Massachusetts. Many of you are not in Massachusetts, so you have to check your state. And if you have staff, you remember you have to take tax from employee paychecks and use software, or if you're some sort of a tax expert. So you need to know and follow deadlines. There are employment laws. You have to check if workers can work in the US. Okay, there's a legal compliance related to that. You have to tell the state about new hires. One of the ways that is done is if you have a payroll software, for example, and again, I say it's an example, it's not a requirement, and there are other companies that do this, but I'll just use one that's commonly known called ADP. ADP will automatically tell the state transparently that of new hires that you bring on board. It is important to know that there are 2 types of staffing. Notice I use the word staffing and not employee, because there's 2 types of staffing, employee and contractor. So a W-2 is a paid employee with tax deductions that you manage. And they see that through the check stub. And it doesn't have to be a printed check stub. It could quite simply be an online one. Very often it's a PDF file that's sent. Um, and for a nonprofit that I do, I actually send a screenshot, and so they get that. What is called a 1099 miscellaneous is a contractor. They do their taxes. And when I say contractor, and perhaps a more simpler term is freelancer, is freelancer. Remember, there are wage requirements, and I know there's a step up for some states. That's the minimum wage, but next year it increases, and the year after that it goes up. So understand what the minimum wage is and what the projected minimum wage is for your local area, and also the rules for overtime, because there's holiday pay as well. Or if you have staff working more than 40 hours per week, there's overtime, usually referred to time and a half, which is 1.5 times the normal pay. For all of this, keep pay and hour records. I generally recommend having some sort of payroll software if you are doing more than just a 1099 miscellaneous, a freelancer, if you actually have paid staff. There's so much detail in the taxation, and also the employee laws. You need that type of platform to help you with that. I always use ADP as an example, not that you have to do that, but it's an easier tool to use for explanation. Contracts, they protect your business. Why? Because if it wasn't written, then it wasn't said. Including with staffing. I almost said employee because there's also freelancers as well. So I should say staffing. Could be a contractor or it could be a freelancer. So what happens is a contract has an offer, acceptance, and value. An offer is what you give to the prospective candidate. The acceptance is the candidate accepts. And the value, that means what they're going to do and for how much. That's the value. Okay. For every contract, I know nobody likes to do it, but I need to say you need to read the small print before signing. It's worth the time to do it now rather than say later, oh, I didn't see the small print. No, now, let me be the one to tell you now. Contracts have small print, read it, okay? And if you ask a lawyer or some sort of legal expert, if you don't know, but whatever the case is, keep all copies of contracts. I'm terrible with paperwork, so of course I scan it with my phone. I think it's Cam Scanner. It's an app where I scan it and I save everything on Google Drive. Google Drive is my filing cabinet, and I've got all the folders. So it doesn't have to be a 4-drawer file cabinet. Let's talk about protecting ideas. You might have a very clever logo. Yes, someone, by the way, someone did ask, will they see a replay? This is probably someone who just arrived. Someone just asked, I'm going to put in the chat again to everyone. So repeat for you, but for the person who just asked the question, this will be on our podcast, not immediately after, but you will see that as well. So I just put that into the chat for you. Okay, so protecting ideas, trademarks. Let's say you have a logo, like for example, I have SCORE above me, not my logo, but you may want to protect that. Copyright, creative work. It could be sound, like music. It could be a book. Could be something else. Or if you have a new invention, you're about to sell something unique, like for example, a new pump that's efficient, that pumps water or something like that. You might want to have a patent. But anyways, you want to register for either the trademark, the copyright, or the patent to have stronger protection, because your competition may take advantage of your unprotected work and make money off of it. So you want to be protected. That's part of competition, unfortunately. Okay, those are some things to consider. Um, Insurance. A lot of people that deal with cars, for example, if they're using their own car for Turo, I believe it's called, where they use their own car as a car rental business, you need to have insurance to cover accidents. If you have a facility where you're renting and you don't own the facility, like a barber shop, you might need insurance that supplements your coverage on top of what the facility where you're renting from. So you want to protect yourself. Since it's not full insurance and more of additional insurance, for you, it wouldn't be outrageously huge based on that one particular example that I gave. But anytime you have a parking lot, someone slips and falls, anytime you have a building, um, e- e- even if you're renting it, check to make sure that the place you're renting from has the insurance. Most cases it does, but you need to do your due diligence and check it. But you want to protect all the buildings, and even if you're renting it, what about your inventory? You want to protect that as well. Um, Workers' comp, injured workers, people get hurt on the job. Who's held liable? Well, usually for a freelancer or contractor, that is not the case. And of course, in your contract agreement, they would be held liable. You might have the requirement in your contract that they carry their own health insurance. And if they're driving for you, for example, if they're a medical or personal care type of person going to clients and they drive their car to the client, well, you in your contract agreement that they agree that they have health insurance and vehicle insurance so that it doesn't come back to you. That can be the requirement up front. But then there's other types of insurance, and some of them are required by law, but it's different from state to state. Let's take a look at data protection. It's not a contract we're talking about per se, but as you've heard in the news, a lot of hacking happens, cyber attacks. That is usually the doorway to vulnerability. So you want to use strong passwords. And what do we mean by strong passwords? Not a password that's 4 characters, which is the last 4 numbers of your social security number. No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about using passwords with an @ sign or an exclamation point and a combination of letters and numbers as well. So you want to have those 3 things: letters, numbers, and some sort of a symbol like a exclamation point or an @ Now, I mentioned in the second bullet to lock paper and digital info, some of you might have important elements in an office, and therefore only certain people are allowed to have the key. People come and go in a business. Make sure you know who has the key, and if they've left the business or they're planning on leaving the business, make sure you get the key back. Make a contract that the key is being issued to them. It cannot be copied, and they bring it back to you. When you do make copies of keys, you can label it such that a copy can't be made. So if a person tried to go to the local hardware store to get a copy of a key made, they'll see that and they're trained to restrict making copies. Of course, if you do that, you won't be able to make other copies again unless you have the master key that doesn't have that labeling. But you can mark keys, no copies allowed. Okay. So train staff about safety. This is in your best interest because part of labor safety laws, for example, if you have some sort of a warehouse, and when I say a warehouse, it could be a closet, could be just a closet of some inventory items. You know, if something is on the top shelf and something falls on them and then they sue you, well, you don't want that to happen. They need to be trained that, hey, if something's on the top shelf, there's a small step ladder that they're required to use and that they've signed off on, that they know the safety requirements. Okay. You have to do all these extra things so that you are covered in case of a lawsuit. Uh, there are laws called GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation. And that's something relatively new. That's all, and strong passwords is part of that. And also how you do it. So tell customers how you use your data or not use your data. So for example, if they're signing in with an ID and a password on a platform to access and buy something from you, if you created the platform, for example, if you're not using Shopify or Etsy or any of those type of tools, you may be obliged to explain that your data is not being sold and it's only used for internal customer relations manager database stuff. Let's go to health and safety. Some of this I've talked about before, the OSHA rules, which is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. That's what OSHA stands for. It's a relatively new agency as far as time goes. It's from 1970, but this relates to giving safety training and tools. And just using the example I gave before, safety training. You tell the person, if you need something from the top shelf, here's the tool. It's a step ladder. That's an example. If someone gets injured, keep a record of that, a detailed record of it. If they cut their finger on paper, they got a paper cut, somehow record that. It does not a big deal to record that, but just have that documented somewhere. Could be just one sentence. But if the person comes back next week and says, I got this huge infection and I got to go to the hospital. Okay, well, when did this happen? Well, it happened 3 weeks ago. Well, you got the paper cut yesterday. Okay, so you want to keep these records. But just make sure that your work environment is a safe place to avoid those problems. Let's talk about advertising rules. I don't need to say it, but I will be honest in ads. And why not? Just be honest with ads. There are so many ads out there that aren't, and those companies that are picked out, their credibility is dropped to zero. Don't be one of those. Do not hide important information. A lot of people are using AI that says, write an ad for XYZ, and it'll help you make sure that you're not missing any. I'm not saying use that as the final, but use that as a tool. Okay. But follow certainly the special rules when you advertise on things that certainly about food and health. I could add medicine, for example, if you're part of a medicine delivery service, there's certain advertising rules related to that as well. For example, hand delivery of medicine. Okay, but use simple and clear language. Why? You're speaking to a very broad audience. Let's talk about how we handle problems. Well, one of the problems that comes out is that there was no contract in the first place, or there was not a contract agreement made in the first place. Because when we make contracts, if there's a dispute or disagreement, how it's handled, how it's mediated, and what the procedure is, that should be in the contract. It's like forecasting and predicting a possible problem. What is it, like Murphy's Law or Peter Principle? I forget which one it is, but anything that could possibly go wrong will go wrong. I'm an optimist, but I'm using that as an example. That's how contracts are created. They're to cover all things. I mean, I don't know if some of you know about that famous story about the woman who burned coffee on herself, and she won a substantial amount of money from a fast food restaurant. And now you see when you go to a fast food restaurant, it says on the coffee cup, careful, contents may be hot. I mean, you read that and you say, isn't that obvious? Well, they do that because of what happened. Now they have to document it. You've heard me talk about documenting. Look at the coffee cups that you buy from these coffee shops or fast food restaurants, and look at that small print. And you'll be learning, yes, it's in small print. And number two, it's documentation. So, yes, now even a coffee cup is a contract. Think of that. A coffee cup is a contract. You bought it, there it is, it's in your hand, you read it, you burn coffee in your hand, that's on you. Okay, so they have to do that. There's a reason for that because someone won a lawsuit. So you ask, why are these crazy laws exist? Why do these crazy laws exist? It's because someone won a law case, a legal case. As you try to solve the problem, try talking or mediation. Most of the problems are solved by open communication, but know how to solve early and save time and money. You don't want to go to court. Let's do more. Record keeping. Keep a record of everything. Tax, employee, money records, keep everything. Although the general rule is 3 to 7 years, at the federal level, generally it's 7 years. I'm going to pause a minute as didn't the lady get third-degree burns from the coffee? I think it was McDee's coffee that was way hotter than advertised. There was someone who actually talked about, I spoke generally because I didn't want to misquote the facts. I think you're right, but I didn't want to misquote the facts. So that's why I spoke very generally. Um, uh, Now, where it says send required reports on time, what that's talking about is a lot of federal reports. For example, quarterly taxes that a business might have, be on time with that. Certain filings you might have to do locally, depending on the state that you're in. So then there's certain extra rules. Whatever industry you're in, I don't know if you're in construction. Of course, when you're dealing with heavy equipment, there's certain laws, rules, and regulations about that. Follow that. If there's zoning laws for your location, like if you're opening up a food truck, a food truck that's selling maybe ice cream, or it's selling tacos, or it's selling hot dogs, where can you park the truck? Do you need a metal emblem on the truck saying that you've been licensed? Where are you allowed to go? Where are you not allowed to go? So certain areas are allowed and other areas aren't. Like, for example, ice cream trucks. In certain states, there are streets that an ice cream truck cannot go on. But in other states, an ice cream truck can go on all streets. So it depends. Some permits require a posted sign. In my area, if we're doing an event outside the church, like a speaker with a microphone, some music, and a barbecue, there's a red permit that I have to put very visible. And usually I put it on the sign of the church. So that way it's authorized, but that's a legal requirement. Not only just to get the permit, you have to post the permit. Other issues is make the business easy for disabled people. You've seen businesses have ramps, for example, for wheelchairs. ADA stands for Americans with Disabilities Act. So you may need to be ADA compliant. Now, if you're renting a building or renting a facility, then you may not need to be ADA compliant, but the place you're renting from does. So that would be on their side of responsibility. So if you're renting a facility, a lot of what I'm talking about, you would just need to ask to confirm that that is compliant. Now, again, for those that are arriving, we'll be emailing this book to you as part of the notes after this webinar. Be aware it may go to your spam folder because it's an attached file. No strings attached. It is free. In the table of contents, it is clickable. For example, if I'm on chapter 3, practical tips for effective negotiation strategies, when I click on that, it goes directly to that. And you saw the detailed table of contents. So that'll be sort of as part of the webinar, the detail of that. But I just want, for those that arrived late, I wanted to share that with you. Also, for those who arrived late, I will put some information into the chat. And I do see Nora asked a question. So Nora, I'll just put this in the chat. And you said, how about international laws when trading? Where can we find such laws? You may find it in the book that I just spoke about. Number 2, these international laws would also be done at the federal level. There is a tool that I'm going to share with you, an AI tool for those that are looking for international laws. A great place to check is kind of the Google on steroids. It's free. It's called Perplexity. And I just sent it to everyone in the chat. So look at the book and also use Perplexity. So that's where you can get your detail. Next, let's go to some tax basics. We're going to understand some federal, state, and local business taxes. We've got a lot of people from different states today in the webinar, so check with your local area. So let's first talk about what an EIN number is. Now, we talked about that before, but I'm going into a little bit of a deep dive now. That's employer identification number. Now, you get that after, not before, the articles of organization. That is filed with your state. And that is what I usually call the birth certificate of the corporation. So the EIN number is first. I should say the articles of organization is first and the EIN number is second. But certainly you need it to hire workers and open up a business account. So the minimum requirement to open up a business account, normally it's 3 things. Number 1, the articles of organization, which is you do first, not second. Next is the EIN number, which you do second, not first. And then the third one is the business plan. But you know what the beautiful thing about a business plan as it relates to the minimum requirements to open up a business account? It's basically an extraction of what you put in the articles of organization. You might add a couple of things like who's running the business? What do you do? That kind of thing. Well, that's in your articles of organization. Okay. And now let's talk about federal taxes. All businesses must pay federal income tax. As it relates to businesses, in some states, a sales tax, not a sales tax, state tax is not required. Now, businesses, you may collect sales tax only because of what you're selling. You might sell a product and therefore you collect sales tax, but you may need to file taxes once a year or every few months, depending on the state that you're in. At the federal level, generally the recommendation, not a hard, fast legal requirement, but it is 4 times a year at the federal level. At the federal level. I'm going to pause a bit. This is worth getting a screenshot. Rather than spend a few hours talking about all of the forms, I'm just going to give this to you now. There it is. That is all of the forms that you need to be aware of, not that you're going to be using all of them. If you look at number 13, 14, those forms 990s, that's for a nonprofit organization. A nonprofit organization is when you file Form 1023. Again, 1023. That is where you register to become a nonprofit organization. Once you are approved as a nonprofit organization, then to maintain your tax exempt status, then you would need to file Form 990. So as you read this screenshot, and hopefully you're doing a screenshot of it, that's what is meant by exempt organization, meaning exempt from paying taxes. So hopefully you've gotten a screenshot of it as I turn the page. Let's talk about state and local taxes. Notice the first bullet says your state and city may also collect taxes. Doesn't say that it will. You'll have to check your local state and your local city. You can use Perplexity. For those that's noticed in the chat, I did put the website in Perplexity. The way Perplexity works, it's instead of like Google where it lists websites to check, it'll summarize what you ask based on the websites and give you the citations as well. Just a little bit of a new AI tool, a new search tool. I call it Google on steroids, but that Perplexity website is in the chat if you haven't seen it already. Also, you may need a tax license from your local government, so ask about that as well. Let's talk about payroll taxes. Again, for those that were here earlier, I use ADP to talk about taxation. ADP, Advanced Data Processing, that's a company that does taxes. They're one of the older, more established. You don't have to use them. I always just use them as an example because they're very complete. But they automate a lot of the things we're talking about here. For example, if you have workers, they automatically take taxes from their pay and file it with the state and at the federal level so that you don't have to worry about it. You just generate the W-2 that goes to the employee at the end of the year. It'll also pay the FICA, that's the Social Security tax, and the Medicare tax, all of these deductions that you see in the check stub. Okay, and also the unemployment tax as well, everything, all of that. But if for those that are freelancers or contractors, whatever you want to call it, they're filed with a 1099 miscellaneous. That's a tax form used to report certain types of payments to non-employees. Those are freelancers or contractors. So you may have those. Very often, a sole proprietorship, for example. Remember, for those that were here at the beginning of the webinar, we talked about sole proprietorship. Their staff, notice I use the word staff, not employees, because we have both employees who are W-2 and then the freelancers that are 1099 miscellaneous. Okay, but the staff is usually a 1099 miscellaneous for a sole proprietorship. So for filing and reporting, do your due diligence. Know when your deadlines are. You want to be able to file tax reports on time to avoid fines. And not only that, not only do you pay fines, you pay the penalty of being on record of being late. And so you are opening yourself up to a possible audit. And if you can avoid that, that would be great. Use accounting software or tax expert for help. I generally recommend that. I use H&R Block for business. You don't have to do that. I just use them for so long. That's who I use. So I'm just using that name as an example. But it doesn't have to be that. For another organization, I do the treasury work for the church. We use Zendu. So that's Xendoo. So there are many of these that you can work with. So again, letting everyone know that this is not a law class. We're just talking about considerations. We talked about that in the beginning, but for those who just arrived, just letting you know that now. Also, this book will be sent as an email to you. Be aware because of the attachments that it may go to your spam folder. So if you're looking for a follow-up on this webinar that you're attending today, you say, well, why didn't Dr. Hewitt send this to me? Well, it's probably in your spam folder. So be aware of that because it's an attached document. Let's talk about some employment laws, how to hire, pay, and treat workers legally. Let's take a look at that, hiring workers legally. We talked earlier, for those that were with us in the early part of this webinar, you want to check if the worker can work in the US legally. It was always a requirement, but for those that have been watching the news, it's more of a sensitive topic nowadays than it was, say, many years ago. So you want to form I-9, which officially called the Employee Eligibility and Verification Form. It talks about it's from USCIS, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. And just to share, it's not a comment about judgment. My wife was an illegal alien when I met her 23 years ago. She's a citizen now, so my comments today are not of judgment. I lived it too. Um, but anyways, it's a greater requirement. You must keep this form for your records in the event that you're audited or need to email some information to the federal government related to that. As we talked about before, a lot of payroll platforms report new hires that you bring in. That's done automatically. Again, I use ADP only as an example because they're very good at it. When you plug in all the information and status levels of each employee, that information automatically goes to the state level. It's directly connected. And so that's convenient. Again, I'm just using that as an example, but it's easier than one person spending so much time. Payroll and taxation, a lot of work, unless you're a much larger organization, large enough so that you're scaled in such a way you can have your own department. Notice I say department within your organization to do that. Well, that's different, and that's better. You want to classify your workers correctly. Are they 1099 miscellaneous? Are they W-2? When I say 1099 miscellaneous, I'm talking about freelancers. When I'm talking about W-2, I'm talking about official employees where you deduct taxes and FICA, which is the Social Security, the Medicare, all of that. That's what we're talking about here. So the wrong classification can lead to fines and legal trouble. An example is hiring an employee but not deducting taxes. Okay, that's what we're talking about. Let's talk about wage and hour rules. I think this is pretty much consistent throughout the country for the most part, not for 100% of the part, but for the most part. There's the requirement of minimum wage. It's different from state to state what that minimum wage is. It's either federal or state, whichever is higher. There is overtime or also holiday pay. It's a minimum of 1.5 times the normal pay, which is why they call it time and a half. But in other states, it might be double, it might be different. And also certain industries like police work is a little bit different as well. But again, it's different, but just be aware of that. What is the standard work week? Is it 40 hours? And there are certain rules, for example, in a hospital, a nurse, for example, who might work a 12-hour shift 3 days a week, that's 36 hours, that may be considered full-time and therefore fully eligible for benefits. like sick time and vacation time, for example. So it may not be 40 hours. It might be slightly less because of the schedule. So if it's 5 days a week, it might be 40 hours. If it's 3 days a week, it's 36 hours. Okay, so again, check with your state, but I share this with you. It's a consideration, just see what's available, depending on the type of business you have. You might have a PCA or personal care assistant for elderly care. That might be a 12-hour shift overnight kind of thing. So that might be 3 days a week and at 36 hours. So do check that. There are required notices. You must post certain signs at your business. For example, warehouses and inventory control areas have OSHA rules that are required. If you're dealing with equipment like forklifts and things like that, there may be signs posted requiring that you wear a hard hat and steel-toed boots. If you are running a restaurant, you may be required to have a sign that says all employees must wash their hands before going to work. That's in the restroom, the bathrooms. Those signs are there for a reason because it's a legal requirement. So for a restaurant that all employees must wash their hands before leaving the bathroom. Now that sounds like an obvious thing, but when you see something that seems ridiculous, why does it have to be documented? It's because there was a legal case in a court of law and somebody won. That's one. It's just like for those who were in the webinar earlier, we were talking about the woman who burned herself at a fast food restaurant and she won a case. Following that, you go to a fast food restaurant, the coffee cups say the contents might be hot. So yeah, whenever you see anything like that, it's because somebody won a legal case. Let's talk about contracts. We talked earlier, if it hasn't been written, it hasn't been said. Contracts protect your business. It also protects the person that you're contracting with. So a contract is designed to be a win-win situation. And that's because everybody is sure what they're supposed to do and when they're supposed to do it. But the whole idea is it's to avoid misunderstandings and certainly to avoid legal problems. As I say, if it hasn't been written, it hasn't been said, and that's what you want, a contract with everything. So to make it valid, there's three parts: offer, acceptance, and considerations. So the offer is someone's giving an offer. On the other side, there's an acceptance. And then the consideration is what's being delivered and how much is being paid for it. But there's an agreement on both sides. Nora asked a question. I'm going to spend a moment to answer Nora. Are verbal contracts legit in business? Verbal contracts are legit to do, and they're legit in business. But the question you probably should have asked was, are they legit in a court of law? That is no. So, and the reason why I say that is if it hasn't been written, it hasn't been said, because there has to be a recorded media, if you will, of what was agreed upon. And the simplest form is the written document. So in a court of law, a verbal contract, a verbal agreement, or a handshake is not enough. It's got to be in writing. Okay. So that's where that answer comes from. So I'm going to just send our verbal contracts. I'll just say no, as I put there. So that was a question Nora asked that I just answered for her. So to avoid problems, and Nora, this goes to you, always read contracts before signing. Have someone double check it, might be a lawyer, have a signed copy for your records. Of course, both copies could, and it could just be a PDF. You've seen those applications, DocuSign, they're online signatures. You can certainly do that. Those online signatures, that's certainly valid as well, but at least it has the terms and conditions. That's all of the small print. What is being agreed upon. But that's why you want to avoid those type of problems. The other thing is you want to protect ideas. We talked a little bit about this as well. Sometimes you might have this brilliant idea. And then when you start doing it, all of a sudden you find a competitor that's doing the same thing you're doing, but they had more backing so that they're stronger and competing against you. So to avoid that problem, you want to protect your business name. Well, that's what an LLC does, because you've registered the name the uh, with the state, with the articles of organization. Your logo or your slogan may need a trademark. There's a patent and trademark office, USPTO. So do a search on USPTO. That's the United States Patent and Trademark Office. If you have a real clever idea or some sort of an invention, be it for, if your business is selling to a business or to the general consumer, if it's really unique, then you might want to look at USPTO. If you're opening up a business to sell pepperoni pizza, well, pepperoni pizza was invented in New York about 100 and some odd years ago. That's where pepperoni was created. But anyways, you would need to deal with USPTO on that. But any type of clever idea so that nobody takes it from you. Let's take a look at copyrights. Writing, music, and art. I gave the example before, if you're selling something on Shopify or on Etsy, Etsy is used for crafts and things like that. Or if you're using selling music or books, writing, or other type of things, this content would need to be protected through copyright. So you want to look at the US Copyright Office for that. Now you get copyright automatically when you create something, if and only if you mark it as copyright by Dr. David Ewan, for example. That's an example. To go back to this book that we were giving you, we have clearly labeled it as public domain, and you will see in the watermark, there it is, public domain. We gave that away. Use it, whatever. We don't care. It's a gift. So you could do that as well. And that's what we have done. It's public domain. Now, someone might copy it and say it's copywritten. Well, the public domain overrides it. So they wouldn't be able to win that. But this is free and open to the public. It's a book I put together. And again, everybody will get a copy of this Legal Aspects of Small Business, a comprehensive guide. We'll be getting that to you. So that's different. But you want to register for stronger protection in court. Patents, we talked to be specific about it. You may apply to the United States Patent and Trademark Office, but a lawyer will help you with this process. You may need some sort of legal counsel or help, but this is a way to make sure others cannot sell your invention that you created. You don't want anyone to reverse engineer something you created and make money off of your intellectual property. That's why we're talking about patents. Pardon me. Let's talk a little bit about insurance and what that means. And that's to reduce risk. And when I say insurance, if you haven't dealt with it in business, you probably want to think about it in terms of like your car insurance, or for those that own a home, your property insurance. You certainly don't want anything to go wrong, but when it does, if it does, you're covered. And so there are different types of insurance that you may need to help protect your business. There are accidents. For example, if you have employees, we talked about OSHA laws earlier in this webinar. You're trying to protect yourself from, someone slips and falls in the parking lot. Either the building you're renting from has property insurance, or if you own the building, you have property insurance. But the idea is you want to prevent any type of lawsuits or any type of disaster, financial disasters. And there are insurance that is required by law. It's different from state to state, city to city. So be aware of that. For example, electricians and plumbers. There's licensing that's required in some states. In other states, it isn't. Um, and then there's insurance that's on top of that, whether you're licensed or not. Again, the rules are different from state to state. So be mindful of that. There are basically three kinds of insurance. The general liability, which is pretty much universal. It covers any type of injuries or damage to your business. The property insurance is specifically the capital equipment, the big ticket items like the building or the equipment. Like if you have a truck, or you have a tractor or a bulldozer or a backhoe, whatever it might be, or it might be if you have a manufacturing plant with robotics, that would be an example of equipment. Okay, that's what that's for. The third one is workman's compensation or workers' compensation. That's the insurance that covers injured workers, and usually that's required. And the difference comes from the type of industry it would be. For example, if you are in a medical care facility, or if you're in a logistics type of environment like a warehouse or distribution center, that kind of thing, that might require absolutely workers' compensation. Construction, building construction or home construction would require that as well. Other type of insurance types, professional liability. Notice that's a profession. Like a doctor has malpractice type of insurance. Lawyers have similar type of insurance. So those are certain professional liabilities. Product liability covers harm from a product. Like, for example, if you have a food truck or a restaurant, you're giving food. So if someone sues you because they got food poisoning, then they might sue you. And in turn, because of that, you might sue the distributor. So it might be a lawsuit that goes up the line, but that's product liability. I gave that. Cyber insurance could be data hacks. So for example, if you have an e-commerce site and that is your business, and your database was hacked, and it impaired someone's credit line by a variety of different reasons, and if you're sued for that, that cyber insurance protects you. Kind of a new type of insurance. You don't hear much about that. Usually it's the professional liability and the product liability that you hear about. But you'll know, depending on the type of industry or the type of business you have. It's all about health and safety is what we're talking about. There are OSHA rules to keep your team safe and also your business safe as well. Again, OSHA is Occupational Safety and Health Administration, which is designed to set safety rules for workplaces. Some organizations really don't think much about it. Others do, but certainly in retail, if you have a retail operation and you have a parking lot and the general consumer population going in and out of your building, then there's certain type of insurances and also safety rules that need to be posted, especially for workers. I gave the example before, even restaurant workers, we gave the example of food poisoning a moment ago. It is posted in restrooms where food is served that all employees must wash their hands before returning to work. Now, again, it seems obvious, but why is that written? It's because someone won a legal case. It went to court, someone won. So now it's a requirement. Okay. So one of the ways we can keep workers safe and also follow the OSHA rules, this is a requirement, is to give safety training to all workers. Now, this little things may not need a full PowerPoint or a 1 hour training, but it could be just a document that the person signs, they read it, they understand it. Okay, there's the training. But in other organizations, it may require a full day training on how to use the bulldozer and backhoe. And here's how you put on the safety gear. Here's why you wear the helmet. Here's the PowerPoint presentation. Here's the speaker. It's a classroom. And then their final exam. Okay, you are certified, meaning you understand the safety rules. So when we say give safety training to all workers, it can quite simply be sign this document all the way up to a full day training certification class. But it's all about using the right safety equipment or the right safety procedures. But the idea is to make sure that these type of hazards are avoided before someone gets hurt. In everything that you do, there is record keeping and reporting. Keep records of injuries and accidents. Report serious injuries to OSHA quickly. So not only does OSHA provide the compliance, they are the receivers of the reports as well, because if something big happens, they're the first ones to arrive in terms of investigation. So there are OSHA inspections that are required. Even the fire department, for certain, it could be like our church. I use our church as an example. Twice per year, our fire inspectors they need to come in. They want to see the ramp that goes up. They want to see the two exits, and they want to see the two fire extinguishers. And that's and they want to see exit signs lit up and work. And they also test the emergency lights. So, and they report to OSHA. So there are inspections that are done by police, fire, and OSHA, all of it reported to OSHA. So be mindful of what's required in your city, in your state, and your industry. What does your business do? Depending on, there are different types of inspections. Certainly a restaurant has certain inspections that would be different than a warehouse or distribution center. Okay, so safety matters. It protects not only your team from harm, but if your team does get harmed, then there's a lawsuit. But more importantly is the safety of the people. That's number one above all things. But today we're talking about legal compliance. So, when I mention it's for lawsuit, it's not to make the safety of the people less. I'm just staying on topic. That's all. But that's why the whole idea is you want to avoid fines when you don't want to violate the rules, but you're also trying to avoid those legal problems. If you're spending time paying for fines, which is an expense, and dealing with legal problems, then your business won't be running smoothly. So you want to be on top of your game when it comes to that. Now, when you're running a business, there are problems that come up. You want to know how to handle conflicts and use clear contracts. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. Now, contracts should say what happens if there's a problem. Not that if you do this, you get paid for that. That's part of it. And that's the fun part. But you also have to talk about the other part that's not so fun. And that's why we talk about how you solve a problem, how it's mediated. for example, in a very large company, they'll say, the mediator is human resources. In a small company or small business, it might be talk to the owner and talk it out, okay, and solve the problem, okay. But what you want to do is you want to avoid court and say, which will in itself save time and money. So when you think of a contract, think of how would I use this in a court of law? Okay. Position your mind to think like a lawyer or a judge. Why am I doing this contract? Not just to say, do this and you get paid for this. If you don't do the job, then you don't get paid. Okay. That's an example of a problem. Okay. You get paid after you do the work, for example. You get paid by hour. So if you leave halfway through your shift, you don't get paid for the full day. Okay. So those are some of the common things. And then there's also things like if you don't perform, there's disciplinary action. A disciplinary action could be you'll be given a first warning. That's all. Not nothing big, but it's all of these things to make sure that you hired a person to do a job and that they do it. And if they don't, what happens? Okay, you don't want the employee to say, well, I didn't know. Okay, so that's what contracts are for. Solving contracts. Um, I I read that wrong. I said solving contracts. Solving contract problems, which is solving conflicts. So you want to try to speak it out, talk it out, and also be discerning. Be discerning. Recognize that a problem is brewing before it actually happens. Try to solve it. Mediation may require a third person. People feel comfortable when there's a conflict, rather than have a battling match verbally, have a neutral third person to help as well. And use arbitration. What is arbitration? Arbitration is that mediation outside of court. If you can avoid court, and then that would be an option. So that's a good key word, arbitration. So the idea is it matters because you're avoiding lawsuits. The way you document and create your contract, and use AI if you have to, just so it's thorough and complete. But you want to avoid all the lawsuits that you can possibly do so that you can keep your business running. You want to reduce stress and protect relationships. A business should have a staff, be it contractors or freelancers or employees, official employees like a W-2. You want to have your business like a family. Okay. You don't want to have any type of negative feelings or hurt feelings. If everybody is on the same page through a contract, it's worth it. Don't be afraid of creating a contract that has the tone, well, I don't trust you, so I'm going to document. That's not what it is. It shows that you're on point, you're of order. A business is supposed to be motivated, organized, disciplined, and responsible. That's what makes a contract. I'll say it again: motivated, organized, disciplined, and responsible. And when you show that, that bleeds off to your staff. So your staff, when they see how you behave by way of your contracts, they too will be motivated, organized, disciplined, and responsible. So, and all of that is part of the contracts and as part of the OSHA reporting, and injury reporting and payroll and all of that. A lot of it is done software driven, or if you're using a third party company on their platform, that's where a lot of the record keeping is. Again, the record keeping examples that I've been using for today is ADP. They keep all the records of the payroll. I only use that because they're one of the larger ones and people know who they are. You don't have to use just them. There are others. Your accounting company that you do where you upload and they do all the work, all the record keeping is there. So it doesn't just have to be you in this paper cabinet, you open up this drawer and you're opening up this cabinet. It doesn't have to be that at all, but just know that it is something you need to have. Tax returns, receipts, and contract. Why receipts? I mentioned receipts. It's because of the tax write-offs. Even if you're a sole proprietorship, uh, you want to have that. Years ago, when I was starting as a sole proprietorship, I would use, well, Amazon really didn't exist as it does now. Actually, my company and Amazon started the same month in the same year. We're both the same age, 31 years. But what I'm in the habit of doing as a tax write-off is when purchases are made on Amazon, all of those purchases are on file, they're on record. So a lot of our office supplies and computer supplies come from Amazon. Not because it's better, it's because we choose one uniform place to get all of our tax write-off purchases. That's why we do that. It's whatever is easy for you. But the other way, it'll save time. Bank statements, even though the third bullet says keep bank statements, well, that's in your online banking anyways, but just know that they're there and how to access them. Any type of money related reporting that you would be doing, including investments as well. Tax records, 3 to 7 years. Usually at the federal level, it's 7 years. State level, it may be less depending on the state you are from. Certainly employee records, best kept when you're using an online platform to manage staff. If you're doing it yourself, make sure you've got a really good Excel spreadsheet or whatever tool you're using. For those using Excel, you can upload it to Google Drive, and that Excel turns into Google Sheets. So it's saved and usable from there as well. That way you don't have to worry about, these extra furniture in your office. But whatever works. Some people like working with paper and that's okay too. But make sure you know how long you need to keep records. I think most people keep records more than they really need to. My wife and I, we were looking at but we had records from the 1990s, and that was before I met my wife. Yeah, we finally shredded those finally. Um, so reporting correctly, certainly the taxation, for those that were here earlier, we gave a screenshot of some tax forms that are required. You need to be able to send required reports to the government on time. An example is paying your federal tax 4 times a year. State taxes, check with your local government. It is not the same state to state. There are certain renewals for licenses and for permits and for certifications. Again, license, permits, and certifications. There are renewals. There will be an expiration for if it's not renewed, and there may be a penalty if it expires and then is renewed. So be mindful of those certifications, permits, and licenses. Those are 3 different